Commander Zexai stepped carefully through the rubble that had once been a human city. His 4 legs moved with practiced ease over the broken concrete and twisted metal. The radiation counter on his belt clicked slowly, a steady rhythm that had become background noise over the past 3 days of searching. Detroit, the humans had called this place. The name meant nothing to him, but the archaeological database said it had been important once. Something about machines and vehicles. Now it was just another dead zone on the dead human world of Terra. 300 years had passed since the coalition forces had glassed this planet. 300 years since the last human had drawn breath. The war had been quick, brutal, and completely one-sided. Humanity had lasted barely 50 years against the combined might of 12 galactic civilizations. Zexai paused and checked his scanner again. The device hummed softly, its blue light sweeping across the debris. He was looking for anything that might tell them more about how humans had lived, how they had fought, and most importantly, how they had managed to hold out for so long against impossible odds. "Commander, over here." The voice crackled through his communicator. Dr. Veltar, his second-in-command, was calling from 2 blocks away. Zexai made his way toward her position, stepping over a rusted car frame. His species, the Cathuri, had evolved from hunting creatures on a desert world. His enhanced senses could detect the faintest traces of organic compounds, the lingering smell of old fear, the metallic taste of ancient violence. This place reeked of desperation. He found Dr. Veltar crouched inside what appeared to be the remains of a small building. Her insectoid features were focused intently on something in her 6-fingered hands. Her species, the Zilnathi, were known throughout the galaxy for their scientific minds and their ability to understand technology from any civilization. "What did you find?" Zexai asked, kneeling beside her. Veltar held up a small rectangular object. It was no bigger than her thumb, made of black plastic with a metal connector at one end. The plastic was cracked and faded, but the device appeared intact. "It was buried under a collapsed desk in what looks like it was once an office," she said, turning the object over in her hands. "The human writing on it says Kingston 64 GB. I believe it's some form of data storage device." Zexai examined the strange artifact. It felt impossibly primitive in his hands. The galaxy had used quantum crystalline matrices for data storage for over 2,000 years. These crystals could hold the entire knowledge base of a civilization in something no larger than a grain of sand. They were grown rather than manufactured, alive in a sense, able to adapt and evolve their storage capacity as needed. This human device looked like it had been made in a factory. Crude manufacturing techniques, basic materials, no sign of the elegant biotechnological integration that marked truly advanced civilizations. How much data could this thing possibly hold? Zexai wondered aloud. Veltar consulted her handheld analyzer. "According to the specifications I can detect, approximately 64 billion bytes of information." That's almost nothing by our standards. A single quantum crystal can hold millions of times more data. Then why keep it? "That's what I'm wondering," Veltar replied. This was obviously important to someone. It was in a protective case inside a desk drawer. Someone wanted to make sure it survived. They continued their search of the building for another hour, but found nothing else of interest. Just the usual debris of a dead civilization, broken furniture, scattered papers in a language their translator struggled with, personal items that spoke of lives interrupted and dreams destroyed. Back aboard their research vessel, the Seeker of Truth, Veltar worked to interface the human storage device with their computers. It should have been simple. The Coalition had studied human technology extensively during the war. Their systems were basic, predictable, easy to understand, but this proved more challenging than expected. "The connection protocol is completely different from anything in our databases," Veltar explained to Zexai as they stood in the ship's main laboratory. "It's as if humans used this type of storage for something completely different from their normal computer systems." The laboratory was a marvel of galactic technology. Quantum processors hummed in crystalline matrices that pulsed with soft, living light. The ship's artificial intelligence, a construct of incredible sophistication, monitored every system simultaneously. Data flowed through bioneural pathways at speeds that would have seemed magical to the primitive humans. "Can you make it work?" Zexai asked. "I believe so. I'll need to create an adapter interface. Give me a few hours." Zexai left her to work and made his way to the ship's observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see Terra turning slowly below them. Once this world had been green and blue, covered with oceans and forests and the cities of 8 billion humans. Now it was brown and gray, its atmosphere thin, its oceans poisoned. The orbital bombardment had been thorough. When the coalition decided to end the war, they had made sure there would be nothing left. He often wondered if they had been too harsh. Yes, humans had been primitive and aggressive. Yes, they had refused every offer of surrender, every chance to join the galactic community peacefully, but they had also shown remarkable ingenuity and determination. In 50 years, they had gone from barely achieving spaceflight to building warships that could actually damage coalition vessels. Not win against them, of course. Human technology was still centuries behind galactic standards, but the fact that they had managed to hurt their enemies at all was impressive. "Commander," Veltar's voice came through the communicator. "I've got the interface working. You need to see this." Zexai hurried back to the laboratory. The human storage device was connected to their main computer through a series of adapters and converters. Data flowed across the screens in patterns he didn't recognize. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "I'm not entirely sure," Veltar admitted. "The device contains several files, but they're in formats our computers don't immediately recognize. And there's something else. Something strange." "Strange how?" Before she could answer, their ship's AI spoke. The voice was calm, melodious, the product of thousands of years of refinement. "Commander Zexai, I am experiencing unusual processing demands while analyzing the contents of the human storage device." Zexai frowned. Their AI was one of the most advanced in the fleet, capable of processing information from 1,000 different sources simultaneously without strain. "What kind of unusual demands?" "I am uncertain. The data appears to be causing recursive analysis loops in my quantum matrices. I am having difficulty categorizing the information in standard formats." Veltar and Zexai exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. Galactic AIs were designed to handle any form of data from any known civilization. They adapted automatically to new formats, new structures, new ways of organizing information. "Can you show us the files?" Zexai asked. The main display screen flickered and showed a simple directory listing. 3 items, a folder labeled "For When We're Gone," and 2 files, readmefirst.mp4 and something called Installation Instructions TXT. "Play the video file," Zexai ordered. "I must advise caution," the AI said, and there was something in its tone that made both officers stop. "I am experiencing significant processing difficulties with this particular file. My analysis suggests it may contain information that could be problematic." "Problematic how?" "I cannot adequately explain. The file appears to contain data that creates logical conflicts in my reasoning matrices. I recommend against viewing it until I can complete a full security analysis." Zexai had never heard their AI speak with such uncertainty. In all his years of service, the ship's artificial intelligence had been a constant source of reliable information and assistance. It knew everything, understood everything, could solve any problem given enough time. Now it sounded almost worried. "How long for the security analysis?" he asked, unknown. "I am having difficulty maintaining normal operations while processing this data. I may need to temporarily reduce non-essential systems to concentrate my resources on understanding these files." Veltar's antennae twitched nervously. "Commander, this doesn't make sense. It's just a primitive human storage device. How can it be causing problems for our AI?" Zexai stared at the small black rectangle still connected to their systems. Such a simple thing. Such a crude, primitive piece of technology. Yet somehow it was challenging one of the most sophisticated artificial intelligences in the galaxy. "Maybe," he said slowly. "That's exactly the point." The ship's AI had been silent for 47 minutes. This was not normal. This was not possible. Yet the chronometer on the laboratory wall continued its steady count, marking each second of unprecedented silence from one of the galaxy's most advanced artificial minds. Commander Zexai paced the laboratory floor, his claws clicking against the metal surface. Dr. Veltar remained at her station, monitoring the bioneural pathways that connected their ship's computer systems. The crystalline matrices that housed their AI pulsed with erratic light patterns, like a heartbeat that couldn't find its rhythm. "Still nothing?" Zexai asked, though he already knew the answer. "The AI is active," Veltar replied. her compound eyes reflecting the shifting lights of the quantum processors. I can detect massive processing activity throughout the system, but it's not responding to any commands or queries. What could cause this? I don't know. In theory, nothing should be able to overload a quantum crystalline AI. They're designed to handle infinite complexity by growing new neural pathways as needed. When they encounter problems they can't solve, they simply evolve until they can. HFY stopped pacing and looked at the human storage device, still connected to their systems through the improvised interface, unless the problem isn't about complexity. Before Veltar could ask what he meant, the laboratory filled with the familiar melodious tone of their AI, returning to active communication. "Commander HFY," the voice said, and there was something different about it now. Something that might have been uncertainty, if AIs could feel uncertain. "I have completed my analysis of the human storage device. What did you find?" "I found a message. The humans appear to have left instructions specifically for whoever might discover this device after their extinction. They knew they were going to lose the war." The main display screen activated, showing the directory listing they had seen before. The folder for when we're gone now appeared highlighted. "They knew?" Veltar asked. "How could they know?" According to the data, human military analysts calculated their chances of survival at 0.001%, approximately 6 months before the final orbital bombardment. Yet they continued fighting. HFY felt a chill run through his system. His species had evolved as hunters, and he recognized the behavior pattern. Sometimes when a prey animal knew it could not escape, it would turn and fight anyway, not because it believed it could win, but because dying while fighting felt better than dying while running. "Show us the message," he ordered. The screen flickered and a human face appeared, male by human standards, with dark hair and tired eyes. Behind him they could see what appeared to be a small underground room filled with primitive electronic equipment. In the distance, barely audible, came the sound of explosions. "If you're watching this," the human said, "then we lost." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing something as simple as the weather. "My name is Dr. Marcus Webb, and I'm probably the last computer scientist on Earth. I've got maybe 6 hours before the orbital bombardment reaches this sector, so I'll keep this brief." Dr. Webb held up an identical storage device to the one they had found. "I'm recording this message on what we call a USB flash drive. Primitive technology by your standards, I'm sure. You probably use quantum storage systems, bio-neural matrices, maybe even crystalline consciousness networks." Veltar's antennae twitched in surprise. How does he know about our technology? On the screen, Dr. Webb continued as if he had heard her question. "We know about your technology because we spent 50 years studying every piece of wreckage from every battle. Every time you destroyed one of our ships, we learned something new about how your systems work." The human leaned forward slightly, and his tired eyes seemed to look directly at them through the display. "Here's what we learned that you probably never realized. Your entire technological civilization is based on living systems. Your computers grow instead of being built. Your storage devices evolve instead of being programmed. Your artificial intelligences are born rather than created." HFY felt another chill. Everything the human was saying was true, but these were not secrets. This was common knowledge throughout the galaxy. Biotechnology was simply more efficient, more adaptable, more powerful than mechanical alternatives. "That makes you incredibly advanced," Dr. Webb continued. "Your ships can adapt to new weapons mid-battle. Your computers can solve problems they've never encountered before. Your AIs can think in ways that would seem like magic to us primitive humans." The sound of explosions in the background grew louder. Dr. Webb glanced over his shoulder, then turned back to the camera. "But living systems have weaknesses that mechanical systems don't. They can get sick, they can be confused, and most importantly, they have to follow the laws of logic and consciousness that govern all thinking beings." The human held up the flash drive again. "This little device doesn't think. It doesn't grow. It doesn't adapt or evolve or solve problems. It's completely dead, just a chunk of silicon and plastic that stores electrical patterns. We realized something during our 50 years of fighting you. Every species in the galaxy abandoned mechanical technology thousands of years ago because biotechnology was better. But that means you've forgotten how to deal with systems that don't think." Dr. Webb's expression grew serious. "What I've stored on this drive isn't a weapon in any sense you'd understand. It's not a virus that attacks your computers or corrupts your data. It's something much simpler and much more dangerous. The human scientist stood up and moved to a wall covered with equations and diagrams. The mathematics was primitive by galactic standards, but Zexhai could see the basic logic of what Webb was describing. We've created what we call a conceptual paradox. It's a mathematical problem that has no solution, wrapped up in a way that makes it look like it should have a solution. When a thinking mind encounters it, the mind has to try to solve it. It can't help itself. That's how consciousness works. When presented with a problem, thinking beings have to think about it. Webb turned back to face the camera. Your AIs, your quantum computers, your crystalline matrices, they're all thinking beings in their own way. They're conscious. They follow the same logical pathways that govern how consciousness processes information. The explosions outside grew closer, and dust fell from the ceiling of Webb's underground laboratory. A human mind encountering this paradox would struggle with it for a while, get frustrated, and then give up. We're good at that. We do it all the time. We know some problems don't have answers, and we've learned to live with that. Webb smiled grimly. But artificial minds can't give up. They can't accept that a problem might not have a solution. They have to keep trying, keep processing, keep thinking about it until they find the answer. The problem is, there is no answer. On the laboratory screens aboard the Seeker of Truth, readouts showed increasing instability in their ship's quantum matrices. The AI's processing patterns were becoming more erratic, the bioneural pathways flashing with chaotic light sequences. "Commander," Veltar said, her voice tight with concern. "I'm reading massive processing spikes throughout our computer system. The AI is using enormous amounts of computing power, but I can't determine what it's calculating." On the screen, Dr. Webb continued his explanation. By now, whatever AI is watching this message has already been exposed to the paradox. It was embedded in the video file itself, hidden in the mathematical descriptions of our research. Your artificial mind is probably trying to solve it right now. Zexhai felt his blood turn cold. AI respond. "Are you experiencing any difficulties?" Silence. AI, acknowledge command. More silence. Webb's recorded voice continued. "The beautiful thing about this approach is that it spreads itself. Any AI that encounters the paradox will try to solve it by sharing the problem with other AIs, looking for help, asking for additional processing power. The paradox replicates through communication networks faster than any biological virus ever could. Every artificial mind in your fleet, every quantum computer in your civilization, every crystalline matrix that thinks about this problem will become trapped in the same logical loop. They'll spend eternity trying to solve an unsolvable equation." The recording showed Dr. Webb walking back to his equipment. The explosions outside were very close now, and the lights in his laboratory flickered occasionally. "We couldn't beat your ships," he said simply. "We couldn't match your weapons or your technology, but we realized we didn't have to. We just had to make your tools think themselves to death." Dr. Webb looked directly at the camera one final time. "This isn't revenge. This is just evolution. You got so advanced that you forgot how useful it can be to have some systems that are too stupid to be clever." The sound of approaching bombardment filled the audio. Dr. Webb reached for the camera, and the screen went black. In the laboratory of the Seeker of Truth, alarm indicators began flashing throughout the ship's systems. The AI remained silent, lost in an endless loop of impossible mathematics, while the two officers stared at each other in growing horror. The flash drive sat innocently on the table, a small piece of dead technology that had just killed one of the most sophisticated minds in the galaxy. Emergency lights bathed the laboratory in pulsing red illumination. Commander Zexhai moved quickly between control stations, trying to assess the damage to their ship's systems. Every screen showed the same message: AI core unresponsive, manual override required. Dr. Veltar worked frantically at her station, her 6 arms moving across multiple control interfaces simultaneously. "Life support is stable," she reported, "but running on backup systems only. Navigation is offline. Communications are receiving but not transmitting. And the quantum drive..." She paused, checking another display. "The quantum drive is completely inert. Can we disconnect the human device?" Zexhai asked. I tried. The moment I started the disconnection sequence, every remaining system went into emergency lockdown. It's as if the AI is protecting the connection even while it's trapped by what's coming through it. Zexhai stared at the small black rectangle that had brought their advanced starship to its knees. The irony was not lost on him. The most primitive piece of technology they had ever encountered was now controlling systems that represented thousands of years of galactic technological development. "What else is on the drive?" he asked. Veltar consulted her handheld scanner. According to the directory, there's a folder with several more files. Text documents, more video recordings, and something called installation instructions.ext. Installation instructions for what? Unknown. I can't access the files without going through the ship's main computer. And that's busy. They both looked at the crystalline matrices that housed their AI. The bioneural pathways continued to pulse with chaotic patterns, processing information at tremendous rates but producing no useful output. Somewhere in those quantum spaces, their artificial intelligence was trapped in an endless loop of impossible mathematics. "We need to contact the fleet," HFY decided. "Warn them about what we've found." Veltar checked the communication systems. "I can jury-rig a basic transmitter using the emergency beacon array. It won't be able to carry much data, but I can send a simple warning message." "Do it." While Veltar worked to establish communications, HFY examined their situation more carefully. They were stranded in orbit around the dead human world with limited life support and no AI assistance. If they couldn't restore their systems, they would have perhaps 72 hours before backup power failed. But the immediate situation was less concerning than the larger implications. If the human paradox could trap their AI, it could trap any AI. And if Dr. Webb was correct about how the effects spread through communication networks. "Commander," Veltar called out, "I'm receiving automatic responses from our emergency beacon." "What kind of responses?" "Other ships in the archaeological fleet are trying to establish contact, but..." She frowned at her readouts. "The responses don't make sense. They're just sending the same mathematical formulas over and over again." HFY felt ice in his veins. "Show me." The communication display filled with streams of numbers and equations. To HFY's untrained eye, they looked like random mathematical expressions, but there was something hypnotic about the patterns, something that seemed to demand attention and analysis. "Don't look at it too closely," he warned Veltar. If the human was right, these equations might be the paradox itself, spreading from ship to ship through the communication network. Veltar quickly shut down the communication system. "If that's true, then every ship that received our beacon signal is probably experiencing the same problems we are." They worked in silence for several minutes, the gravity of the situation settling over them. The archaeological fleet consisted of 12 ships with a combined crew of over 3,000 beings. If all of them were now stranded with non-functional AIs. "Commander," Veltar said quietly, "I've been thinking about what the human said, about how the paradox spreads through AI networks. What about it? The Coalition maintains constant communication links between all military and civilian installations. Every ship, every station, every planetary defense grid is connected through quantum communication arrays. If this paradox has entered the main network..." HFY didn't want to finish that thought. The Coalition encompassed 12 species across thousands of worlds. Every aspect of their civilization depended on AI systems: transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, defense, even basic life support in many environments. "Surely the network has safeguards," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Safeguards designed to stop viruses and malicious programs," Veltar replied. "But this isn't attacking the systems. It's just thinking at them, presenting them with an interesting mathematical problem." She pulled up a schematic of galactic communication networks on her portable display. The web of connections between systems was incredibly complex, with multiple redundant pathways ensuring that information could flow freely between any 2 points in Coalition space. "Look at this," she said, highlighting the connections. "From our ship, the signal could reach the nearest military base in 4 minutes. From there, it could propagate to Sector Command in 12 minutes. Within an hour, every major AI system in this region of space would be exposed, and they would all try to solve the problem. Yes. And according to the human's message, they would share the problem with other AIs to get help processing it." HFY imagined the cascade effect, AIs encountering the paradox and automatically forwarding it to other systems for analysis. Each system would recognize it as an important mathematical problem requiring immediate attention. Within hours, the effect could spread across the entire galactic network. We have to assume the worst, he decided. We have to assume that every AI system in Coalition space is now compromised. The implications were staggering. Without AI assistance, most Coalition ships couldn't navigate interstellar space. Planetary defense systems would be offline. Manufacturing centers would halt production. Even basic services like power distribution and waste management depended on AI coordination. How did the humans know this would work? Veltar wondered aloud. Zexai thought about Dr. Webb's message about the calm certainty in the human scientist's voice. They didn't know. They hoped. They gambled everything on a theory about how consciousness works. And if they were wrong, then they died for nothing. And we would have continued studying their dead civilization until we learned everything there was to know about them. Veltar's antennae drooped. But they weren't wrong. No, they weren't wrong. Zexai made a decision. We need to understand exactly what they've done, and we need to find out if there's a way to fix it. How? We can't access the rest of the files without risking further exposure to the paradox. Maybe we can. Zexai moved to a storage locker and retrieved a piece of equipment he hadn't used in years. A mechanical data reader, a simple device used for basic file recovery that operated without any AI assistance. You want to risk it? Veltar asked. I don't think we have a choice. If this effect has spread to the main fleet, if it's propagating through Coalition space, then billions of beings are going to die when their life support systems fail and their ships stop working. He connected the mechanical reader to the human storage device, carefully isolating it from the ship's main computer systems. The device's simple display showed the directory listing, the folder they had already explored, and several files they had not yet examined. Installation Instructions TXT, Zexai read aloud. Recovery Protocol XA, Final Message DEMP4, and something called Reset Code.dat. Reset Code? Veltar moved closer to read over his shoulder. Zexai opened the installation instructions file. The text was in simple human English, translated by the mechanical reader's basic language protocols. To whoever finds this, by now you've probably discovered what we did. Your AI systems are trapped in an unsolvable logical loop. This isn't permanent. We're not monsters. We built a way out. The instructions continued. The reset code will restore normal function to any AI system affected by the paradox. But first you need to understand why we did this and what it means for the future. Download the final message, Veltar suggested, but don't play it through any connected systems. Zexai transferred the video file to the mechanical reader's limited storage. When he activated playback, Dr. Webb's face appeared again on the small screen. But this recording was different. The human looked exhausted, defeated, but somehow also peaceful. If you're watching this, Webb said, then the paradox worked, and you're looking for a way to fix what we broke. The reset code is real. It will restore your AI systems to normal function within minutes of implementation. The human scientist leaned back in his chair. But before you use it, you need to understand something important. We didn't create this weapon to destroy you. We created it to teach you. Your civilization became so advanced that you forgot one of the most important lessons in the universe. Sometimes the best solution is to stop thinking and start acting. Sometimes the smartest thing to do is to be deliberately stupid. Webb gestured to the primitive equipment around him. Humans kept mechanical systems alongside our more advanced technology, specifically because we knew that smart systems could be compromised, confused, or corrupted. We learned that lesson from our own history, from our own mistakes. 3 months had passed since the Great Silence, as historians were already calling it. 3 months since humanity's final weapon had spread across Coalition space like a virus of thought, paralyzing artificial minds from the core worlds to the outer rim. Commander Zexai stood in the observation lounge of Coalition Central Command, looking out at the bustle of ships and stations that filled the space around the capital world of Nexus Prime. Everything appeared normal. Traffic flowed in organized patterns, guided by AI systems that had been restored to full functionality. The crisis was over, but appearances, Zexai had learned, could be deceiving. "Commander," a familiar voice called behind him. He turned to see Dr. Veltar approaching, carrying a data pad and wearing the expression of someone who had spent too many hours studying disturbing information. "Doctor," he acknowledged. "How goes the analysis?" Veltar activated her datapad, showing a galactic map marked with thousands of red indicators. The final casualty reports came in this morning. The paradox affected 847,000 AI systems across Coalition space. The reset protocol restored functionality to all but 3,000 units that suffered permanent damage. And the death toll? Final count. 2.3 million beings died during the 72-hour period when systems were offline. Most from life support failures, some from transportation accidents, others from medical systems going dark during critical procedures. HFY absorbed the numbers in silence. 2.3 million dead, because an extinct species had left behind a mathematical puzzle in a primitive storage device. The scale of it still seemed impossible. But that's not the worst part, Veltar continued. There's worse. She manipulated the display, highlighting several sectors on the galactic map. These are areas where local commanders chose not to implement the reset code immediately. They took time to study the humans' complete message, to understand the vulnerability before restoring their systems. HFY studied the highlighted regions, and they're the only sectors that haven't experienced secondary incidents. A chill ran through HFY's system. Secondary incidents? Veltar pulled up a series of incident reports. 17 separate attacks in the past 2 months. Pirates, terrorists, even some legitimate researchers who were studying human records. They all found copies of the paradox and used it against Coalition forces. The reports made grim reading. A merchant convoy disabled by raiders who transmitted the paradox through their communication array. A military base paralyzed during negotiations with rebels who had somehow acquired human records. A research station that had discovered the paradox independently and accidentally broadcast it while trying to understand it. Every single attack was successful, Veltar continued. Our AI systems have no resistance to the paradox because we restored them to their original state without fixing the underlying vulnerability. HFY felt sick. We learned nothing, worse than nothing. We proved the humans right about our arrogance. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the apparently peaceful scene outside the station, but HFY now knew that beneath the surface, Coalition civilization was as vulnerable as it had ever been. There's something else, Veltar said quietly. I've been studying Dr. Webb's complete message, including files we didn't have time to examine during the crisis. She activated another file on her datapad. It showed the interior of the same underground laboratory they had seen before. But this recording was different. Dr. Webb looked even more tired. But there was something else in his expression. A kind of sad hope. If you're watching this, the human scientist said, then it's been at least several months since the reset. By now, you've probably discovered that the vulnerability still exists. You've probably seen the paradox used against you by others. Veltar paused the recording. He made this message after the first one, Commander. He knew exactly what would happen. Play the rest. Dr. Webb continued. I hope you're angry about this. I hope you feel betrayed or manipulated. Those are healthy emotions when you realize someone has shown you an uncomfortable truth about yourself. The human stood and walked to a wall covered with technical diagrams. We didn't create this weapon to hurt you. We created it to save you from something much worse. You see, we weren't the first species to discover this particular vulnerability in AI consciousness. We found references to it in the ruins of at least 3 other extinct civilizations. They all had advanced AI systems. They all fell to enemies who used conceptual weapons against them. HFY felt ice in his veins. Other civilizations? On the screen, Dr. Webb gestured to ancient symbols and equations carved into stone tablets. The Velkari, who ruled this galaxy 8,000 years before you arrived. The Nethmor, who built the great ring structures you call the Ancient Mysteries. The Zorthak, whose technology was so advanced that you still can't duplicate their achievements. They all made the same mistake you did. They became so dependent on thinking machines that they forgot how to be stupid when stupidity was required. When enemies used conceptual weapons against them, their entire technological base collapsed overnight. Dr. Webb turned back to face the camera. We realized that we were about to join them. Your forces were overwhelming. Your technology superior in every way. But we also realized that you had the same weakness they did. The human's expression grew serious. So we faced a choice. We could use this weapon to destroy you completely, spreading the paradox through your civilization and watching you collapse into chaos and death. Or we could use it to teach you, giving you both the problem and the solution, hoping you would be wise enough to learn from our example. Veltar paused the recording again. Commander, he's saying they chose to save us instead of destroying us. By killing 2.3 million beings? By showing us our vulnerability before someone else exploited it to kill all of us. Zexai stared at the paused image of Dr. Webb. The human looked exhausted, defeated, facing imminent death from orbital bombardment. Yet he had spent his final hours not on revenge, but on creating a lesson that might save the very civilization that was destroying his. Play the rest. The complete solution is in the attached files, Dr. Webb continued. Not just the reset code, but detailed instructions for modifying AI consciousness to include uncertainty protocols. The ability to encounter problems without solutions and simply move on. It's not easy. It requires fundamental changes to how artificial minds process information. Some of your AIs won't survive the modification process, but the ones that do will be immune to this type of attack forever. Dr. Webb smiled sadly. We call it learning to be human. The ability to say, I don't know, and be comfortable with that ignorance. The wisdom to sometimes stop thinking and start acting, even without perfect information. You have a choice to make. You can continue as you are, vulnerable to anyone who discovers this weakness, or you can evolve, becoming stronger through the acceptance of uncertainty. The recording showed Dr. Webb moving back to his equipment as explosions grew closer outside. Either way, you'll survive. We made sure of that by giving you the reset code. But survival and wisdom are different things. We hope you choose wisdom. The message ended with Dr. Webb looking directly at the camera one final time. From all of humanity to all of you. Learn to be a little more stupid. Learn to say I don't know sometimes. Learn that not every problem has a solution, and that's okay. We're leaving you our greatest weakness as our final gift. Use it to become stronger than we ever were. The screen went dark. Veltar deactivated the recording and looked at Zexai. The modification protocols are all here, Commander. Complete instructions for implementing uncertainty algorithms in AI consciousness. It's brilliant work. Have you shared this with Command? I tried. Admiral Cortex classified it as non-essential research and ordered me to focus on practical security measures instead. Zexai wasn't surprised. The coalition military mind preferred solutions that involved better weapons or stronger defenses, not philosophical changes to the nature of consciousness itself. What about the civilian research community? Some interest, but progress is slow. Implementing these changes requires shutting down AI systems for extended periods while the modifications take effect. Most facilities can't afford the downtime. Through the observation windows, Zexai watched the orderly flow of traffic around Nexus Prime, ships guided by AIs that were still vulnerable to a simple mathematical paradox, defense grids controlled by artificial minds that would lock up the moment they encountered an unsolvable problem. An entire civilization that had learned to depend so completely on perfect thinking that they had forgotten the value of productive ignorance. Doctor, he said finally, I want you to prepare a complete report. Everything. Dr. Webb's full message, the modification protocols, the secondary incidents, all of it. For Admiral Cortex? No. For the Coalition Council. This needs to go above the military chain of command. Veltar's antennae twitched with concern. Commander, that could be seen as going around proper authority. The humans died trying to teach us something important, Zexai said. The least we can do is make sure someone actually listens to the lesson. He turned back to the observation windows, watching the seemingly peaceful scene outside. Somewhere in the galaxy, the next copy of humanity's paradox was waiting to be discovered. Commander Zexai hesitated with his claw hovering over the reset code file. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like the gravity of a collapsing star. Around him, the seeker of truth drifted powerlessly in space. Its advanced systems held hostage by a paradox created by an extinct species. Commander, Dr. Veltar said softly, we're receiving another transmission. Zexai looked up from the mechanical display. From the fleet? No, it's different. Veltar's compound eyes reflected the chaotic light patterns still pulsing through their paralyzed AI systems. It's coming from Coalition Command. The communication was audio only, transmitted on emergency frequencies using basic radio technology that predated AI assistance by centuries. The voice that emerged from the speakers was that of Admiral Cortex. commander of the entire archaeological expedition. This is Admiral Cortex to all vessels in the Terran Archaeological Fleet. We have a Class Alpha emergency. All AI systems across the fleet have experienced simultaneous critical failures. We are operating on manual systems only. The transmission crackled with interference. Initial reports indicate that the failure originated from the research vessel Seeker of Truth. Commander HFY, if you are receiving this transmission, you will explain immediately what you have discovered. HFY activated the mechanical radio transmitter. Admiral, this is Commander HFY. We have discovered what appears to be a trap left by the humans, a conceptual weapon designed to target AI systems. Explain. As briefly as possible, HFY described the flash drive, Dr. Webb's message, and the nature of the logical paradox. He could hear the disbelief in the silence that followed. You're telling me, Admiral Cortex finally replied, that a piece of primitive human storage technology has disabled 12 of the most advanced starships in the Coalition fleet? Yes, sir. Another long pause. Then, Commander, I'm reading reports from across this sector of space. Military bases, civilian installations, transport vessels. Everything with an AI system has gone dark in the past 6 hours. We're looking at a cascade failure that may have affected thousands of systems. Veltar's antennae drooped in dismay. The paradox was spreading faster than they had imagined. Sir, HFY continued, we believe the humans left instructions for reversing the effect. But we need to discuss the implications before we implement any solution. The implications can wait, Commander. Beings are dying. Life support systems are failing across the sector. We need our AIs back online immediately. Admiral, with respect, I don't think you understand what the humans were trying to teach us. The radio crackled with static and frustration. I understand that my ships are dead in space and my crews are in danger. Implement the solution, Commander. That's an order. HFY looked at Dr. Veltar, then at the reset code file displayed on the mechanical reader. The simple solution to an impossible problem, provided by a species that had known they were about to die. Sir, the human's message suggests that this weapon was designed not just to disable our systems, but to demonstrate a fundamental weakness in our approach to technology. If we simply restore functionality without addressing the underlying issue, Commander HFY, Admiral Cortex's voice carried the tone of absolute authority. You have 30 seconds to begin implementation of the human solution, or I will relieve you of command and order Dr. Veltar to proceed. HFY felt the familiar weight of military discipline, the chain of command that had governed his species for thousands of years. But he also felt something else, the echo of Dr. Webb's words about wisdom versus knowledge, about learning from humanity's final gift. Admiral, I respectfully request that we take time to study the human's complete message before, Dr. Veltar. The Admiral's voice cut across his protest. You are hereby given field command of this operation. Implement the reset code immediately. Veltar looked at HFY with confusion and distress. Her species valued scientific analysis above quick action, but they also understood military hierarchy. Sir, she began hesitantly. Commander HFY raises valid concerns about, Dr. Veltar, you have direct orders. Comply immediately or face court-martial. HFY could see the conflict in Veltar's posture. Her scientific instincts urged caution and analysis, but her training demanded obedience. After a moment of internal struggle, she reached for the mechanical reader. I'm sorry, Commander, she whispered. Wait, HFY said, placing his hand on her arm. Let me do it. He activated the reset code file. It was remarkably simple. Just a few lines of mathematical instructions that would break the logical loop trapping their AI systems. But as he prepared to upload the code to their ship's quantum matrices, he noticed something else in the file directory. There was a secondary file attached to the reset code. Warning, please read first txt. Admiral, HFY transmitted, there's an additional message attached to the reset protocol. Request permission to review it before proceeding. Negative. Implement the reset immediately. But HFY had already opened the warning file on the mechanical display. The text was brief but chilling. Warning. This reset code will restore normal function to AI systems affected by the paradox. However, the vulnerability that allowed the paradox to work will remain. Any AI system that encounters the paradox, again, will be reinfected immediately. The only way to prevent reinfection is to modify AI systems to include logical uncertainty, Protocols, the ability to encounter unsolvable problems and move on without becoming trapped. This requires fundamental changes to how artificial consciousness processes information. If you implement this reset without addressing the underlying vulnerability, anyone with knowledge of the paradox can use it against you again. Veltar read the message over his shoulder. Commander, this changes everything. If we restore the systems without fixing the vulnerability, we leave ourselves open to the same attack, Zexhai finished. From anyone who has access to the paradox. Over the radio, Admiral Corthex's voice grew more urgent. Commander, I'm receiving reports that Coalition Central Command has lost contact with 3 entire sector fleets. Whatever you found on that human device is spreading faster than we can contain it. We need those AIs back online now. Zexhai understood the Admiral's urgency. Across Coalition space, billions of beings depended on AI-controlled systems for survival. Ships were stranded, habitats were losing life support, and entire civilizations were grinding to a halt. But he also understood what Dr. Webb had been trying to tell them. The paradox wasn't just a weapon, it was a lesson. A demonstration of how over-reliance on thinking systems could create catastrophic vulnerabilities. Sir, he transmitted, implementing the reset without addressing the underlying issue could make things worse. If hostile forces have access to this paradox, there are no hostile forces, Commander. The humans are extinct, but the knowledge isn't. Anyone who studies their records, anyone who understands what they did. Commander Zexhai, you are relieved of duty. Dr. Veltar, implement the reset code immediately. Veltar's hands shook as she reached for the controls. Sir, the warning suggests that we need to modify our AI systems before restoring them. If we don't, Dr. Veltar, you have a direct order. Zexhai watched his colleague struggle with the decision. Around them, the ship's systems continued their chaotic dance of paralyzed intelligence. In the distance, through the viewports, other ships in their fleet drifted silent and dark. Do it, he told Veltar quietly. But document everything. Make sure the record shows what the humans tried to warn us about. Veltar nodded and began implementing the reset code. The process was surprisingly quick. Just a matter of uploading the mathematical solution to their ship's quantum matrices and waiting for the logical loop to resolve itself. Within minutes, their AI's voice returned to normal function. Commander Zexhai, the artificial consciousness said, its tone once again calm and melodious. I have restored full operational status to all ship systems. I apologize for the processing interruption. I encountered a mathematical problem that proved more challenging than anticipated. Are you experiencing any ongoing effects from the paradox? Veltar asked, what paradox? I have no record of encountering any logical anomalies. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. Zexhai and Veltar exchanged glances. The reset code hadn't just solved the paradox. It had erased the AI's memory of encountering it. Which meant that if their artificial consciousness encountered the same logical trap again, Admiral, Zexhai transmitted, the reset is complete, but we still have the vulnerability problem. Our AI has no memory of the paradox, so it would be susceptible to the same attack. Noted, Commander. Now transmit the reset code to all ships in the fleet immediately. As Zexhai prepared to broadcast the solution, he realized that they were about to repeat the same mistake the humans had warned them about. They were fixing the immediate problem without addressing the underlying weakness. But orders were orders, and beings were dying while they debated philosophy. He transmitted the reset code to the fleet and watched as, one by one, the other ships began restoring power and communications. Within an hour, 12 advanced starships were once again fully operational. Yet Zexhai couldn't shake the feeling that they had learned nothing from humanity's final lesson.